Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar series run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session focuses on working with partner agencies. And what we are looking at is essentially the governance standards associated with this, and also walking you through the policy templates of what your agency really should be looking at in terms of its governance standards. Over the next few months, we are going to continue these series. We've had a large number of agencies join us. And with that, we do run these weekly on Mondays to look at the key legal compliance areas that your agencies, as a not-for-profit agency, really should be focusing on. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners. So today's agenda continues our open legal webinar series on governance, risk, and legal compliance areas that your agencies need to consider. Today's session focuses on working with agencies or partnering with agencies and what this essentially looks like. Well, as always, we'd like to give you the recommendations and show you where we are heading. Obviously, we recommend that you review the governance standards, access the Gemba 360 dashboard, and conduct a self-assessment and look at the legal policy template. So with that, let me just show you where you can find this information. And you can see that on the slides in front of you. So our recommendations and legal recommendations for your agency to consider is to look at the dashboard. This is some of the specific tools that you have, as well as also some legal documents, including policies that we will refer you, and I'll show you those right now. And of course, you will get a recording and access to the resources. And here you can actually make a time with us directly to go through and answer any questions that you might have out of today's session, or also to look at something much more specific to your agency. So that said, let's just jump in and have a look quickly at the resources. Now, our law firm website, you can go to gemba360.com and access it that way and click here to go to Gemba, or you can simply go to gemba360.com, which is the governance, risk, and compliance dashboard. Now, once you log in, this is just our demo group here. You can go to the Gemba Docs template, which I will just show you. And when you click on Gemba Docs, what you'll see is a list of folders. One of those will be the policies and procedures register. And you can see we're slowly building up our policy resources. We have our cybersecurity. We've got the safeguarding policies that we referred to before, and one of which is now today's working with partners. And the policy template, when you click on that, will simply open up. And let me bring this up for you. Here it is here. And you'll find that it is a Word document. Now, we will come back to this document as well. And I'll just click on this. Here we go here. And you'll find that it is a Word document. Now, we'll come back to this in today's session, but you'll see it focuses on all the different specific requirements, records, reviews, legal obligations, samples, and also authorizations. So that is a policy template ready to go that you can use with that. The other part of the tools that you also have, if I just go back to the dashboard, is the self-assessment tool that we're progressively building on and working through. So you can see that I've got that on the left-hand side of my toolbar. I'll just move that up and down for you. And with it, once it starts to scroll, you'll see that on your toolbar. It's the ones with the spanners. There we are there. It's just moving up and down. And the governance, risk, and legal compliance tool. Now, this is the self-assessment tool that we do have that's open for all of you to access. And if you're already accessing it, you can simply edit it, or you can click on add a new entry, which I'll do here. And this has the self-assessment tool of all of the things that we're going through today. And if I look at working with partners, you'll find that we've got this specific questions here. And this was taken from all the different governance regulators, including the ACNC, ASIC requirements that's important for your agency, as well as the other legislative requirements that your agency needs to follow. But I will come back to that as part of today's session. So let's just jump back to the slides. So with it, when we talk of corporate governance and the rules and requirements, well, essentially these overview of governance obligations means that there are a number of key requirements that or standards that your agency must follow. And we've covered all of these in the past sessions, and you can have a look at those as you need to. So I won't go over these again, except to say that when you're looking at some of the key governance areas, what we're finding is that there are 4 areas that agencies really need to focus on in 2023 to start with. And this will actually lever off the other works that we're going to walk you through in terms of the legislative requirements. So let's have a look at working with partners and what this actually means for your agency. Well, essentially working with partner agencies essentially covers that many charities develop obviously working relationship with partners from other charities and other not-for-profit businesses as well too. But what does this actually mean? Well, there are a number of legal obligations, and if you go onto the ACNC website, you'll find this information here. So essentially the legal obligations as spelled out by the ACNC regulator, and as I mentioned, we're not associated with the ACNC in any way, but as part of this, what we do find interesting is that all charities registered with the ACNC must continue to be not-for-profit and pursue charitable purposes. Now, most charities must comply with the ACNC governance standards. For charities operating overseas, the external conduct standards will apply. But in saying that, there are a number of key requirements that your agency needs to follow. What we are finding is that there has been changes to the legislative requirements, and this is where we will actually build off and extend some of the information we've seen on the ACNC website and also on the ASIC site in terms of what your agency really needs to consider. So essentially, at its core, developing corporate partnerships is a viable way for charities to raise extra funds and boost volunteer numbers and support. Now, it should mean that as part of this process, that yourselves need to have what they call proper due diligence in terms of your requirements. So some of the key points to consider is that while partnerships can be a way to raise extra funds, what you need to look at is what are the prospective corporate partners want in return. And poorly executed policies or partnerships can hinder rather than help a charity actually manage what it actually wants to achieve. And essentially, there is this need to actually regularly review corporate partnerships and what they need to look at. So essentially, what you need to see is that a corporate partnership where a charity forms a relationship with a business, it usually involves a charity like yourselves receiving funds, goods or services in exchange for something the corporate partner sees as beneficial. And that doesn't matter whatever size your agency is. It means that for charities, the aim of a corporate partnership should be to establish a relationship that helps it achieve its charitable goals. Now, when you look at the guidelines that the ACNC provides, it talks about risk assessments and what agencies need to consider. But what there isn't actually in this is, well, how do we actually do it? What are the safeguards? And it talks of the requirements that your agency needs to manage its own risk assessments to ensure that you meet all of these reporting requirements. But what does this actually look like in terms of your agency? Well, let's actually go back to our dashboard now. So I'm just back at the dashboard and I'll show you how we're going to go through this. Now, there's a couple of things you need to consider. Let's have a look at the self-assessment tool to start with. So when we go into here, I'm just going to click on add a new entry, and you can do the same at your end. We're just going to bring this up, but we're going to go down to working with partners and what your considerations are. Now, these are divided into a number of key headings: catalyst and identification, entering an agreement, monitoring the relationship, and renewal or exit. So you've got your kind of life cycle of the working with partners and what to do. So there are a series of questions that your agency needs to look at, and these include, when you work through this, if your charity works with partners, does it have procedures to ensure that it does so consistently, effectively, efficiently, such as a partnership policy, a partnership selection checklist, or a partnership due diligence checklist. Now, your agency may have these already, or it may have one similar type of document. What we have done is that what you should be able to do is mark yes to all of these questions that you can see here. We've given you the space down the bottom to add your own comments in, and this self-assessment tool covers some of the legal compliance obligations that your agency absolutely needs to follow. Now, what agencies then ask us for is, that's great that we have this, and some people can actually mark yes to this, but where is the line in the sand that we need to follow, and what do we have? Well, if you remember, I just showed you how you can find the template policy that we have in here. Now, this is certainly not exhaustive, but at minimum, these are the sorts of requirements that your agency needs to follow. And it is a policy template that we actually utilized within another agency as well too. And they've essentially given it back so that we can use it within this group. So essentially what we have done, like we've done with all of the other template policies, obviously we've got the title and we've got the governance standards of what you need to complete. You remember that I said that the regulator, the ACNC, wants to see essentially the number of areas. So catalyst identification, entering into an agreement, renewal or exit. And so what we've got here is carbon copied the exact details down. Now, if you wanted to, you can quite simply go in and you can, dare I say it, search and replace your agency with my agency with your agency name, and you'll have a policy pretty much ready to go, if you like, as well too. But what we have on here, importantly, is to show that you've actually considered each of these points. There's two things that we wanted to point out in here, one of which was that the need to seek external advice, and we're certainly happy to help do that if you need assistance in that space. The other part was that it keeps up to date with relevant legislation, and this will form part of our updates that we'll send out to you when we run these webinars as well. And you'll find that in Gemba, you can actually look up legislation in your own system as well. So with it, once you've done that and you've spelt out the objectives, essentially what the regulators want you to be able to do is show the how do you actually do this. Well, what we've done is then work through some of the core basics of the operational governance, risk and compliance areas. We speak about how this policy governs the external partners while your agency maintains this. How do you actually go about doing it? What is the process that you should follow? Well, some of the recommendations that we have is that who oversees it, what's the purpose of it, and what are the current strategies in terms of making your risk assessments. After we've done that, what we've also defined out for yourselves, and again, this is a template, is some of the approved partners. So who may actually approve a partnership within your agency? Does it have to go through to the CEO, or can one of the managers actually identify this as well too. Also, what is the review process for this as well? What we've then spelled out as well is also new partnerships as well. So it's not just the review, but essentially what is the 4-step, 5-step process here in terms of what you need to follow and when. And you'll find that as part of this process, it is something that your agency does need to actually consider very, very carefully. And the other part that we can also see is terms of records and reviews. So essentially, most partnerships should be actually reviewed at least every 12 months. And it's a frequency that you should be looking at in terms of whether it meets, as the guidelines say, your own governance standards, but also whether it meets your specific charity's purpose and continues to do so. There may also be some prohibited partnerships that you also want to exclude. Now, a number of charities want to exclude being partnered with manufacture or promotion of nicotine, tobacco products, or gambling and or gaming services. So again, you may want to list some prohibited partnerships within your agencies as well too. And also if there's any international partners that you have as well that you may or may not want to consider. So essentially under this policy document, what you have is the ability to manage all of your overarching high-level policies that you need to consider as part of this process. It also means then that when you go back to having a look at what we have on the slides, and we're going to cover off risk assessments next week, is looking at what is the inadequate or are there inadequate safeguards on access to charities, donors, supporters, and members, and what is your risk assessment process to actually managing partner obligations. Next week, we will also be looking at safeguarding vulnerable people and looking at how to manage your responsibilities in this space as well too. Certainly, we have opened up these webinars since running the COVID Safe dashboards over the past few weeks as well too, and certainly something that you will be looking at as well. As I mentioned, the recommendations coming out of today's session is to review the governance standards, access your Gemba 360 dashboard, and conduct a self-assessment along with the resources. Have a look at the legal policy templates. If you have any questions, then we do recommend that you contact us on one of these numbers. I'm more than happy to stay online and answer any questions that you might have. If you are watching this recording after today's live session and do have any questions, then please reach out to us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com.